Get out! This house is ours now! Those were my son's words as the door swung open and the rain began to fall. My suitcase sat on the lawn, clothes clinging to the wet grass. The air smelled of coffee cooling on the table behind me, the same table I'd bought 25 years ago when I still believed security came from family. My name is Linda. I'm 55, and until this morning, I thought I'd die in this house. The morning had started warm. The radio played old songs while sunlight moved across the curtains. I made toast, counted the bills, and thought about how Eric used to sit at that same table drawing rockets. There was peace in small things, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the porch step, the way dust floated in the light. That quiet belonged to me. I worked for every inch of it, every dollar that went into its walls. That was my warmth before the storm. Then Eric appeared at the door, Megan standing behind him with her arms folded like she owned the place. He raised his voice again. "You heard me, Mom. Get out!" I stared at him, unable to match the man in front of me with the boy I raised. "Eric, this is my home, our home." "It was," he said, shaking a set of papers at me. "You signed it over. It's done." I never signed anything. My throat tightened. Megan smiled, small, sharp, rehearsed. "You must have forgotten, Linda. You really should keep track of what you sign." The rain thickened, running down my sleeves. My hands trembled, not from cold but disbelief. "Where did you get those papers?" Eric didn't answer. He just turned his back, leaving me standing in the doorway. Megan's voice followed him, smooth as glass. "You can take your things and go quietly, or we'll call the police." I laughed once, short and hollow. "Go ahead," I said. "Call them." She tilted her head. "Oh, I think you'll do it yourself. You always did like to follow the rules." I stepped outside. My shoes sank into the mud. Everything I owned, boxes, photographs, coats, lay scattered like discarded evidence of a life. My heart beat so loud it drowned the sound of the rain. I reached into my pocket and found my phone. One name came to mind, Officer Lane. He'd once been a neighbor's troubled son. I'd given him a second chance when no one else would. I dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Linda, you okay?" "I need you to come," I said. My voice was steady, almost calm. "Now." "Is it Eric again?" "Yes, bring someone with you." I hung up before he could ask more. The rain blurred everything, but I could still see Megan on the porch, her expression bright with victory. I picked up a photograph from the grass, a wedding picture of me and my late husband. The frame was cracked, but our faces smiled through the broken glass. I slid it into my suitcase. 5 minutes later, the sound of a car approached, tires slicing through puddles. Eric's head turned, confusion breaking through his arrogance. The police cruiser stopped by the curb. Lane stepped out, taller than I remembered, raincoat dark against the storm. "Afternoon," he said, his tone even but firm. "Everything all right here?" Eric hesitated. "It's a family matter." Lane's eyes met mine. He saw the soaked boxes, the papers in Eric's hand, the tremor I tried to hide. "Family or not," he said, "nobody throws a woman out into the rain." Megan's smile faltered. "You don't understand." He cut her off gently. "Then you can explain it downtown." The tension cracked open like thunder. I didn't move, didn't speak. The rain softened, almost kind. For the first time all morning, I felt control return, not through power, but through calm. They thought they could rewrite my life with forged paper and raised voices. They forgot I built this home with every paycheck, every sleepless night. As Lane guided them inside to talk, I stood by the open door. The smell of wet earth mixed with coffee from the kitchen. I thought of how fast peace turns into proof, how easily love becomes evidence. This was no longer a home, it was a crime scene painted in memory. I whispered to myself, quiet enough that only the rain could hear, "She'll regret smiling at me today." "You forged my name?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The teller froze, her fingers still on the edge of a folder that smelled faintly of ink and dust. The bank at this hour, just past noon, was half empty, filled with the quiet tap of keyboards and the soft whir of a printer spitting out paper. Sunlight moved slowly across the tiled floor. Everything looked calm, professional, ordinary, yet my world tilted right there, between the stamp pad and the counter. I took the folder. Inside were copies of documents that carried my name in blue ink I never used. The signature looped perfectly, but it wasn't mine. It felt like looking at a stranger wearing my face. The young teller shifted nervously. "It's all in order," she said softly. "The transfer happened last month." "Transfer?" My voice came out thin. "The property," she whispered. "Sold by you to your son. At least that's what the system says." I stared at the date. Just weeks ago, when I was busy paying off Eric's remaining car loan, they were signing me out of my own home. The absurdity made my hands tremble. "Who processed this?" She pointed toward a glass office. "You'll need to speak with Mr. Wallace, the branch manager." Mr. Wallace looked like someone who'd spent his life behind a desk. Gray tie, polished glasses, steady hands. When I entered, he greeted me politely, unaware of the storm I carried. "Mrs.—" He glanced at the file. "Ah, yes, Linda. How can I help you?" I dropped the folder on his desk. "That signature is a lie." He leaned forward, studying the page. "It does look convincing. May I ask, was there anyone else with authority to access your ID or personal files?" "My son," I said, the words scraping my throat. "And his wife." He hesitated. "Then I'm afraid you may be a victim of forgery. The transaction went through with verified identification. Whoever did it used documents that passed inspection." I gripped the edge of his desk to stay steady. "So what you're saying is someone pretended to be me, and your bank believed them?" He sighed, lowering his voice. "I'm saying whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing. They provided all the correct information." For a moment, all I heard was the low hum of the air conditioner and the rhythmic clack of a distant keyboard. It was the same sound that had comforted me for years during my visits. Mortgage payments, tuition transfers, savings deposits. I'd walked into this place hundreds of times, thinking of it as safe ground. Now it felt like another betrayal wearing a polite smile. "Can you give me copies of everything?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Yes, but please understand. These are confidential documents. I'll need you to sign a request." I took the pen, the irony not lost on me. The ballpoint tip scratched against the paper. My own real signature looked almost weak beside the forged one. When he handed me the photocopies, he added, "I'll log this as an internal concern, but you might want to report it to the authorities as well. Identity fraud cases can be complicated." "Complicated," I repeated quietly. "That's one word for it." As I stepped out into the afternoon light, the bank's glass door shut behind me with a hollow click. My reflection stared back, hair damp from the earlier rain, face pale, eyes steady. The parking lot shimmered with heat rising off the asphalt. I stood there for a long moment, clutching the folder like a lifeline. Memories collided. The day I'd opened that account to save for Eric's future, the time I'd helped him pay off a fine when he couldn't afford it, the night I'd stayed up balancing bills while he and Megan laughed in the living room. Every dollar had been an act of love, and now every line on that page was a wound. I walked toward my car, feeling each step like a decision. I couldn't undo what they'd done, but I could make it visible. The truth had proof now: ink, paper, dates. They had stolen what was mine, but in doing so, they left fingerprints all over their crime. When I reached the driver's seat, I whispered to myself, "They forgot who taught them to sign." "Why would your mother lie, Eric?" Megan's voice cut through the still air before I even reached the porch. I stopped halfway up the steps, hearing my own name turned into ammunition. Through the open window, her tone was sugar-coated, the kind she used when people were watching. "She's confused, that's all," she added, her laughter soft enough to sound kind to a stranger's ear. I knew that sound. It meant trouble dressed in charm. When I knocked, she opened the door like she hadn't expected me so soon. "Linda," she said warmly, voice carrying across the lawn where my neighbor, Mrs. Briggs, was watering her plants. "You should have called first." "I needed to talk to my son," I said quietly. "Now." "Of course," she smiled, stepping aside. "Eric's just finishing lunch." The moment the door closed, her face changed. The warmth vanished like a flipped switch. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "We already settled everything." I pulled my phone from my coat pocket, thumb brushing the record button. My hands shook, but I pressed it anyway. "You forged my name," I said. "You stole my house." She tilted her head, smirk tightening. "You gave it to us, remember? You said we deserved it after everything we've done." "Don't twist my words." "Why would your mother lie, Eric?" She called toward the kitchen, voice suddenly louder, innocent. "She's saying such strange things again." Eric appeared in the doorway, a dish towel over his shoulder. He looked smaller somehow, like a boy caught between guilt and cowardice. "Mom, please, not here, not like this." "Then tell me what this is," I said. "Explain these papers. Explain why my name's on a sale I never made." He looked away. Megan stepped closer, perfume sharp and deliberate. "No one believes you anymore, Linda," she whispered. "You've been talking to everyone, spinning stories. It's sad." Her words hit like a slap. I kept my voice low. "I've got proof." She laughed, short, cruel. "Proof of what? That you're losing your mind?" The room fell silent for a long second. The sound of the fridge hum filled the gap. Through the curtain, I saw Mrs. Briggs glance toward the house. I didn't speak again. There was nothing to say that could reach them now. I turned for the door. Megan followed. "If you walk out, you'll regret it." "No," I said. "You will." Outside, the afternoon sun hit hard, burning through the last of my hesitation. I waved to Mrs. Briggs, pretending everything was fine. Megan's shadow lingered in the doorway behind me. "See?" she called sweetly across the yard. "We're all fine here." Mrs. Briggs nodded uncertainly. "Everything okay, dear?" "Just a misunderstanding," I said. "Family stuff." She smiled politely but didn't move. Her eyes, though, stayed on Megan, watching the way she gripped the doorframe too tightly, watching the tension that didn't match her words. I hoped she'd remember that later. When I reached the gate, I finally stopped the recording. My finger hovered over the screen, my breath uneven. The file name flashed up, automatically. New Voice Note 3. I saved it. One tiny proof in a growing storm. By the time I got home, the sky had darkened. I sat at the kitchen table, replaying the conversation. Megan's laughter filled the room again, clearer this time, cold and certain. Each word was a blade, cutting away the years I'd spent believing kindness could fix cruelty. "She'll regret smiling at me today." I whispered the same line I'd said before, hearing the echo carry different weight now. The phone screen glowed in the dim light, her voice repeating, her lies preserved. For the first time, I didn't cry. I listened. I memorized the rhythm of her cruelty, every pause, every smug breath. That laugh, the one that dripped with confidence, would end her. I knew it deep down. Her laugh will be her undoing. "You kept every receipt?" That was the first thing Mr. Harris said as he opened the folder on his desk. His voice was calm, but carried a weight that made me sit straighter. The office was small, walls lined with books and fading certificates. A lamp threw soft light across stacks of paper. The air smelled faintly of dust and coffee. Steady, ordinary, safe. It was the first room in weeks where I didn't feel accused of something. "Yes," I said. "Every bill, every draft, every transfer, since the day we bought that house." He nodded, adjusting his glasses. "That's rare these days." He flipped through the receipts, each one a piece of a life I'd built, and they'd tried to erase. I watched him scan the dates, his finger tapping lightly on a column. "You were paying into this mortgage right up until 2 months ago." I never stopped. I said. Even when my son promised he'd take over the utilities, I still covered the taxes. I didn't want the place to fall behind. He gave a short smile. Then that helps us. The system still shows you as a joint owner. That forged deed, whoever did it, won't stand without more documents backing it up. And if those don't exist, we can freeze the sale. Freeze it, I repeated. The word felt powerful, like I was finally pressing pause on the storm. He leaned back. But patience, Linda. Forgery is tricky. You'll need proof, and we'll gather it step by step. The process takes time, sometimes months. The other party will fight, maybe threaten, but once the paper speaks, they'll lose ground. I can handle their noise, I said. I just need the truth on record. He took out a form, tapping a pen against the margin. This notice will stop them from selling or refinancing until we sort this out. It's a formal property hold. I'll file it today. I read the words twice before signing. My hand shook a little, not from fear this time, but from something close to defiance. Each stroke of my pen felt like reclaiming ground they'd walked over without permission. My signature had been stolen. Now it was fighting back. When I finished, he slid the document into a folder labeled Active Cases. The folder looked no different from the others on his shelf, yet it carried my entire future inside it. "Keep your copies safe," he said. "We'll need those receipts again when we move forward." "I will." I gathered the papers, arranging them neatly inside my worn briefcase. It was the same one my husband had once used for his job, still carrying the faint smell of leather and ink. It had survived 2 decades of bills, policies, and savings. It would survive this too. As I stood, Harris added softly, "Linda, people think paper isn't powerful anymore, but in rooms like this, it still decides who keeps a roof and who doesn't. You've done the right thing." His words stayed with me as I walked down the narrow hall. Outside, the late afternoon sun cut through the blinds, throwing long bars of gold across the floor. I passed a mother, helping her little boy fill out a form at the reception counter. She whispered instructions as he clutched the pen awkwardly. Something about that sight caught in my throat. I'd done the same thing years ago, guided my son's hand when he learned to write his name. And now that name was written on papers, meant to destroy me. The clerk at the front desk smiled politely as I stepped out. The door closed behind me with a firm click, sealing the first real boundary I'd drawn in this war. The city noise outside felt distant, almost muted. For once, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. On the bus ride home, I opened my briefcase and looked again at the frozen sale notice. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered, but steadier too. The world kept moving, cars sliding by in streaks of color, yet I felt anchored for the first time since that morning on the lawn. They had used my own trust to steal from me. But trust can be rebuilt with proof, and proof, once written, doesn't forget. The first paper to fight back is signed. "Mom's unstable. She needs help." That's what the woman from social services said her report claimed. I stood at the door, still holding the dish towel I'd been using. Her tone was careful, professional, but her eyes betrayed discomfort. Behind her, the afternoon light flickered through the trees, thin and wavering. It was around 3 o'clock. I could feel time itself pause between us. "I understand this is difficult," she said. "There's been some concern about your well-being." I blinked once, steady. "Concern from who?" She hesitated, flipping through her clipboard. "Your son reached out. He mentioned erratic behavior, forgetfulness, emotional distress." For a second, I almost laughed. "Did he also mention that he took my house?" Her pen stopped midair. "He didn't." "Of course not," I said, letting out a short breath. "Why would he?" The woman looked around my home, her gaze moving from the neat stack of receipts on the table to the clean counters and the half-written grocery list by the phone. "You live alone?" she asked softly. "Yes, and as you can see, I manage just fine." She nodded slowly, writing something down. I watched the movement of her pen, each line like a verdict being drawn. Then she asked, "Do you often feel people are plotting against you?" That question hit harder than any insult. Only when they actually are, I said evenly. Her expression shifted, just slightly, but enough to tell me she wasn't blind to the truth. May I sit? I gestured to the chair. Please. She looked at the framed picture on the wall, my wedding day, and then at the papers spread out before her. You seem organized. I've had to be, I said. It's the only way to stay sane in a world that rewards liars. She tapped her pen gently on the folder. You keep detailed records? Every payment, every conversation, every call, I replied. Since they threw me out, even this one. Her brows lifted. You're recording? No, I said, meeting her eyes. Just writing it down. Words can be denied. Handwriting can't. She exhaled through her nose, quiet but thoughtful. Then she closed the folder. Mrs. She stopped herself, then said, Linda, I'll be honest with you. From what I see, you're fine. But you should know. They've filed this complaint formally. It means they're trying to build something. If they can prove instability, they could influence the property case. So, they want to make me look crazy, I said. It's smart. Evil, but smart. I'm not supposed to give advice, she murmured. But write everything down. Dates, times, what's said, who says it. Keep your documentation clean. It matters more than you think. When she stood to leave, she paused by the door. I see these cases often. Families, inheritance, property. Money turns people into versions of themselves they never admit to being. I nodded once. I already met those versions. Her shoes clicked softly on the porch steps as she left. The quiet that followed felt heavier than before. I looked at the papers on my table, the frozen sale notice, the forged deed copies, the receipts from a lifetime of working, paying, surviving. Proof surrounded me, yet lies still found their way in. By evening, I sat at the same table with a blank notebook in front of me. The first page read, Day 1, complaint filed. I wrote the time, 6:40 p.m. I recorded every detail of her visit, the exact words, her tone, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Then I started a second page titled Manipulation Pattern. I listed the small things they'd done, the rumor at church, the missing mail, the coldness from neighbors who once smiled. Every move was now a record. As the sky darkened, I closed the book and placed it beside the lamp. Its light cast a calm glow across the page. For the first time in weeks, I felt control returning. Not because I had power, but because I had proof in waiting. They could twist stories, file complaints, perform their deceit under polite tones and family names. But paper was patient. Ink didn't forget. I whispered to myself as I capped the pen, Let them call me crazy. Facts have patience. I saw who signed that day. Julia said it so quietly, I almost thought I'd imagined it. The Public Records Office was nearly empty, just the low hum of the ceiling fan and the shuffle of papers from a clerk in the corner. It was just past noon. The smell of old folders and toner filled the air. I stood at the counter, folder in hand, trying to steady my breath. You were here? I asked. When they brought the papers? She nodded. I process most of the property transfers for this district. I remember that one. Her fingers traced the edge of the desk. Your daughter-in-law came in with a man, said she was finalizing a family deed. Her ID looked new. You could tell it wasn't used much, and she signed your name in blue ink. My stomach turned. You're sure? I don't forget faces, she said, or shaky hands. Her words sank in, heavy but grounding. I pulled out my folder, spreading out the photocopies from the bank. This is the version they filed. Look at the signature. She leaned closer, pushing her glasses up. That's the same one, she whispered. I saw her trace over it, twice. I gripped the edge of the counter. You'd be willing to say that? In writing? She hesitated. I could see the conflict in her eyes, truth against comfort. If I have to, she said finally, but only if this gets formal. I can't just accuse someone without procedure. That's fair, I said softly. Just knowing you saw it helps more than you realize." She looked toward the doorway, lowering her voice. "You didn't hear this from me, but her ID number didn't match the format we usually see. I noted it mentally, but the system still approved it. Sometimes truth hides behind bureaucracy." Her words lingered. I reached into my wallet and took out a $20 bill, my last spare note for the week. "Could I get copies of everything linked to that day?" I asked. She looked at the bill, then at me. "It's fine. I'll do it." "No," I said. "You're giving me more than copies. You're giving me back a piece of myself." She accepted the money with a small nod. "I'll print them now." As the printer started, I glanced around the room. Rows of files, cabinets older than I was, every drawer a record of someone's truth waiting to be believed. I thought about how easily paper had betrayed me once, and how it might save me now. Julia returned with a small stack of pages, stapled neatly. "Here you go," she said. "Everything tied to that transaction." I slipped the papers into my folder. "If someone calls you about this," I said carefully, "tell them you remember what you saw. That's all." "I will," she said. "You seem steady for someone going through this." "Steady's all that's left," I said. "If I fall apart, they win." She smiled faintly. "Then don't." When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit sharp after the gray walls inside. The clouds were breaking, beams cutting through like small promises. I walked toward the library steps, the folder pressed tight to my chest. It felt heavier now, but in a good way, like armor. A group of students sat nearby, their laughter light, careless. I envied that ease for a moment, then let it go. I wasn't looking for peace anymore. I was building proof, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. I stopped at a bench, opened the folder again, and looked at the copies. My name, her handwriting, the uneven curve of the forged signature, it all told the story in plain ink. Julia's voice echoed in my mind. I saw who signed that day. I took out my notebook, the one where I'd been recording every detail, and added a new line. "Eyewitness confirmed. Public record clerk saw Megan sign. Will testify if needed." The wind lifted one of the pages from my lap, and I caught it before it flew away. I stared at the paper for a long second before folding it neatly back inside the folder. This wasn't over. It was only shifting. The lies were still standing, but now they had cracks, and sunlight knows how to find cracks. Hope finally has handwriting. "That account was drained yesterday." Mr. Harris's words landed like a door slamming shut. I stared at him, waiting for a correction, some technical excuse. The bank office felt smaller than before. The clock behind him ticked too loud, cutting the air between us. It was just after 10 in the morning. I had walked in expecting progress. Instead, I was watching my safety disappear line by line on a screen. "What do you mean, drained?" I asked. He turned the monitor toward me. My balance flashed in red. 0. "The withdrawals were made from the joint account you once shared with your son, the same account linked to your property payments." I could barely breathe. "That account was closed years ago." He shook his head. "It was reopened 2 months back, digitally. Someone used linked credentials. The transfers were legitimate according to the system." "Legitimate?" I whispered. "Stealing is not legitimate." "I agree," he said quietly, "but proving it requires internal tracing. That takes time." "How long?" "Maybe weeks, maybe longer." I sat still, staring at the screen. I recognized the dates, the days I'd been fighting over the deed, sending letters, calling offices. While I was busy defending the house, they'd been emptying the rest. My savings, the emergency fund I'd built after my husband died, all gone. He leaned forward. "I'll flag the transactions. We'll freeze further activity, but recovery isn't guaranteed." I nodded, though the words meant little. "Who signed the reactivation request?" I asked. "It's all digital," he said. "A few keystrokes, a fake confirmation code, and the system believes anything." "So the system believes them," I said. "Just like everyone else." He frowned. "I'll do what I can. You've helped me before. I haven't forgotten. I'll run an off-the-record trace tonight." "Thank you," I said, my voice dry. "But I know how this goes. The money won't matter soon. It's the proof I need." He hesitated. "You're not thinking of confronting them again, are you?" "I don't need to," I said. "They're exposing themselves." The printer behind him whirred to life. He handed me a copy of the statement. "Keep this," he said. "It's your record now." I folded the paper carefully, slipping it into my bag beside Julia's witness note and the property documents. My life, reduced to a collection of copies, proof on paper, pain on paper. When I left the bank, the wind outside felt sharper, almost metallic. The morning had turned cold. I walked past people in line for the ATM, none of them knowing how fragile a number can be. I had spent decades building that balance, through long hours, careful choices, quiet sacrifices. Each withdrawal on that sheet felt like a small erasure of all those years. At home, I set the papers on the table and stared at them. The screen from the bank lingered in my mind, the flicker of numbers vanishing faster than breath. I realized something brutal in that moment. Fear only works when there's something left to lose. That night, around 8, I went through every account I still controlled. I canceled linked cards, changed passwords, and cut ties to every joint access point. Every click felt like closing a chapter. When I reached the final page, I whispered, "No more." The pen cap I'd been biting slid from my fingers onto the table, rolling until it stopped beside the receipts pile. A symbol of what remained mine, even if only barely. The phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't make this harder than it is." No name, but I didn't need one. The threat was familiar. I deleted it without reply. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and looked at the streetlights. The night was quiet, except for the hum of traffic far away. I thought about every hour I had worked, every dollar I had saved, every small thing I had chosen to go without so that my son could have more. And now I knew exactly what that generosity had bought. My own betrayal. But beneath the anger, something steadier was forming. They had stripped me of money, comfort, even reputation. But there was one thing left untouched. My name. It was written on the first deed, on every check I'd signed, on every receipt they'd forged. They took everything, except my name. "Play it in front of them." Officer Lane paused, his hand hovering above the small recorder. The office smelled faintly of cold coffee, the kind that sat untouched for hours. The clock on the wall read 5:50. I could hear the faint murmur of voices from another room, a printer starting somewhere down the hall. He looked at me once, serious. "You're sure you want this played?" "Yes," I said. "They won't believe me until they hear her." He pressed play. Megan's voice came through sharp and careless. "I fixed Mom's mistake with a pen," she laughed. "You should have seen her face when she realized nothing was in her name anymore." The room went still. Lane's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, no one breathed. "That's her?" he asked. "That's her," I said, "and that's the voice that cost me everything." He stopped the recording and leaned back. "How'd you get this?" "Her friend sent it by accident. A group message, wrong number. I saved it before it disappeared." He nodded slowly. "This qualifies as a confession. It's informal, but we can work with it." He opened a new form on his computer, fingers tapping quietly. "We'll file this as supplemental evidence tied to your property case. The audio file will be stored under restricted access until verification." I sat across from him, hands folded, my heartbeat louder than the ticking clock. "Do you think she'll be charged?" "That depends on the follow-up, but this," he tapped the recorder, "this changes the tone. People talk differently when sound proves them wrong." He handed me a carbon copy of the report. "Keep this for your record." I looked down at the page, at the printed date, October 14th, 6:03 p.m., and felt a strange calm. It was the first official acknowledgement that what I'd been saying all along wasn't madness. It was evidence. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the street orange. The air had that quiet weight evenings sometimes carry when the day's truth finally lands. I could see my reflection in the glass door, older, steadier, no longer begging to be heard. I walked out holding the small recorder, still warm from his hand. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of years no one else had believed. For a moment, I thought about destroying it, just erasing her voice forever. But then I remembered how they'd erased me first. Lane followed me out to the steps. "You did the right thing," he said. "People like her think charm is armor. It breaks fast when the words come back." I nodded. "I'm not looking for revenge, just truth." He smiled slightly. "Truth's loud enough when it's recorded." When he turned back inside, I sat on the cold stone railing, replaying that line in my head. Fixed Mom's mistake with a pen. It wasn't just arrogance, it was ownership. A confession wrapped in mockery. They thought I was too old, too tired, too sentimental to fight back, but they forgot what silence can do when it starts keeping receipts. I opened my bag, placed the recorder between the notebook and the bank files, and zipped it shut. Inside was my whole case, pages, voices, and now proof that breathes. The first time she'd faked my name, the paper had lied for her. Now, her own voice would testify against her. The last thing I heard before the door closed behind me was Lane saying to another officer, "Make sure the copy's clean. The tape will speak louder than I ever did. Police, open up!" The words cut through the night like a verdict. I stood across the street, half hidden behind a parked car, my hands clenched so tight the cold metal pressed marks into my skin. The porch light flickered above their door. Megan appeared in the hallway, her robe loose, her hair messy. For once, she wasn't rehearsed. She wasn't in control. Officer Lane's voice stayed calm. "We have a warrant to search the premises." From where I stood, I could see Eric step into view. His face looked pale, drained. He said something I couldn't hear, then stepped back as they pushed the door open. The sound of drawers opening and furniture shifting carried faintly through the still night. A flashlight beam crossed the window, sweeping the living room like a slow confession. It was strange how familiar everything looked. The curtains I had chosen, the same rug I'd bought on sale after weeks of saving. They hadn't changed a thing, only the ownership. 10 minutes passed before Lane emerged holding a small folder sealed in a plastic sleeve. I recognized it instantly, the one Megan had kept in her drawer, the same folder I'd seen in photos when she pretended to handle paperwork. Inside it was my name, my signature, her forgery. Megan followed him to the doorway, her voice sharp. "That's private property. You can't just take that." Lane didn't flinch. "Ma'am, this folder was listed in the complaint as falsified evidence. It's now in custody." Eric grabbed her arm. "Stop talking," he whispered. "Please." But she couldn't stop. "She set this up," she hissed, pointing toward the street as if she could sense I was there. "She's obsessed. She's been spying on us." Lane turned toward her. "No one forced your voice onto that recording, ma'am, or your name onto this deed." Her mouth opened, then closed. The silence that followed was louder than her shouting ever was. I stood completely still. The air around me felt heavier, charged. I could hear the hum of a distant engine, the soft drip of water from a gutter. Every sound seemed to underline the moment, each second proving this wasn't a dream. One of the officers walked past the window, holding a flashlight, and the silver bracelet I had given Eric for his graduation. I'd noticed it missing years ago, thought I'd misplaced it. Now it dangled from a plastic bag, evidence of everything they'd taken, not just money, but history. Lane stepped outside, speaking quietly into his radio. "We've confirmed both items, fake ID and altered deed, sending digital copies to the file now." He looked up and saw me across the street. His expression didn't change, but there was acknowledgement in his eyes. He gave the smallest nod before turning back toward the house. For a moment, I thought about walking over, about saying something. But what could I possibly say that hadn't already been proven? The front door remained open, the same door they'd once closed in my face when I came to collect a few boxes of my things. I still remembered that night vividly, the rain, the way the porch light flickered then too. Eric had stood there, eyes down, letting her speak for him. "You should go," she'd said. "This isn't your home anymore." And I had gone, because I thought walking away was dignity. I was wrong. Tonight, dignity stood in uniform on their porch, reading them their rights without raising a voice. Across the street, a neighbor peeked from behind a curtain, the way people do when truth visits someone else's door. I wondered what story Megan would tell them tomorrow. Probably something about misunderstanding, confusion, maybe blame it on paperwork again. But this time, the paperwork had hands. It had a voice. It had officers with badges who didn't care for charm or lies. When the folder disappeared into the police car, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't joy, exactly, more like balance. The scales had shifted back, inch by inch, toward fairness. I had waited years for that weight to move. Eric came outside as they loaded the evidence. He looked around the street but didn't see me. His face was tight, almost broken. For a second, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who said he'd never let anyone hurt me. Then I remembered who he'd become, and the sympathy faded. Lane locked the folder in the trunk, then closed it with a final, echoing click. That sound felt like an ending. The night wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of rain again. I watched them for another minute, then turned toward my car. My reflection in the side mirror looked different, tired, but finally unafraid. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it knocks once and lets silence finish the rest. They finally stood where they threw me out. "State your full name." Her voice cracked on the second word. Megan had always been good with tone, soft when she wanted sympathy, sharp when she needed control. But this time, under the courtroom lights, she sounded small. The judge's pen hovered above the docket. My lawyer sat beside me, quiet, letting the silence stretch long enough for truth to grow heavy. She said her name finally, almost whispering. The sound barely reached the back row. The courtroom smelled faintly of paper and sweat. You could feel every breath bounce off the wooden panels. It was just past 11, sunlight pushing through the high windows, cutting straight across the witness stand. I stared at the folder in front of me. Bank records, signed forms, the same pages she once called just paperwork. Now they were the spine of her undoing. The clerk swore her in. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," she said, eyes fixed on the table. My lawyer began. "These documents show a withdrawal of $68,000 from the plaintiff's savings account. The authorization signature appears to match the defendant's handwriting. Can you explain that?" Megan shifted, glancing at Eric. He looked down, jaw clenched. "It must be a mix-up," she said. The bank verified the access came from your registered device," he interrupted. "Would you like me to read the statement from Officer Lane?" Her throat moved, but no words came. You could hear a chair creak somewhere behind us. The judge leaned forward. "Answer the question." She folded her hands tightly. "I was helping. She wasn't well. She needed support. I paid her bills. She didn't understand what was being done for her." My lawyer nodded slowly. "Support. And yet the withdrawals were transferred into your own account?" Her silence was its own confession. Then he pressed play on the small recorder. Megan's voice filled the room, sharp, casual, certain. "I fixed Mom's mistake with a pen," she said, laughing. "You should have seen her face." No one moved. Even the judge froze for a moment, his hand resting over the gavel. The air felt thick, like it needed to hold its breath. I kept my eyes on the folder. For months, that sound had haunted my sleep. Her laughter, that same tone she used to mock me in private. But now, here, it became evidence. What once hurt became weapon. I didn't need to speak. Her voice did it for me. The lawyer paused the playback. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "this recording was submitted through the official evidence chain. The voice has been authenticated." The judge nodded. "The court accepts it." Megan looked up then, eyes red. "You don't know what she was like," she said suddenly, desperation breaking through her restraint. "She twisted everything. She made us feel guilty just for moving on." Eric whispered, "Stop talking." She didn't stop. We built our lives while she sat with her notebooks, collecting receipts, acting like a victim. I turned to face her fully for the first time. "You forged my name," I said, steady. "You emptied my accounts, and you laughed about it." She stared back, but the performance was gone. Only fear remained. The judge struck the gavel once. The sound echoed through every corner of the room, sharp and final. "This court finds sufficient grounds for fraud investigation and asset freeze. Immediate enforcement authorized." Eric covered his face with his hands. Megan stayed still, like she couldn't process the words. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. My lawyer leaned over and whispered, "You did it." "No," I said. "The truth did." Outside the courtroom, the hallway buzzed with low conversation. A reporter asked a question. I walked past without answering. Sunlight hit the marble floor in streaks, and I thought of every morning I'd woken up wondering if anyone would ever believe me. Now they had heard it straight from her. I reached the exit and turned back once. Through the open door, I saw the judge writing his final note, the gavel resting on the desk, the recorder still on the table between us like a silent witness. For once, everyone heard her laugh. "Property restored to original owner." The clerk's voice rang through the courtroom like a bell. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The words I'd been fighting for, writing for, waiting for, finally spoken aloud. The judge signed the decree, the seal pressed firm against the paper. The sound of that single stamp cut through the room like a gavel strike. The case was over. Megan slumped in her chair, staring straight ahead. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering, but she didn't respond. Eric sat beside her, his hands shaking. He muttered something, an apology maybe, but his voice vanished under the shuffle of reporters setting up microphones near the front row. The judge gathered his notes. "The court finds the deeds falsified and the plaintiff's assets unlawfully appropriated. All property rights are hereby reinstated." He paused. "This is the final judgment." The gavel dropped once. Sharp. Final. I looked down at the paper the clerk handed me. My name printed where it always should have been. The document felt warm from the press. Almost alive. I folded it carefully, afraid it might vanish if I blinked. The weight of it settled in my hands like something sacred, proof that truth can survive even after it's buried. The room buzzed. Cameras flashed. Someone whispered, "That's her," as if I were part of some televised story about survival. I wasn't proud exactly. I was relieved, exhausted to the bone, but finally standing on the right side of justice. Megan suddenly stood. "She wanted this," she said, voice cracking. "She wanted to humiliate us." The bailiff stepped closer, calm but firm. "Ma'am, you need to sit down." She turned to Eric, eyes wet. "Say something. Tell them this wasn't what it looks like." He couldn't. He looked at the floor, at the same tiles where months earlier I had waited quietly while their lawyer called me unstable. Now those same tiles reflected their downfall. Justice doesn't arrive kindly. It arrives clean. Reporters began shouting questions. "Ma'am, how do you feel after the verdict? Do you plan to file civil charges? Was this about money or family?" I kept walking. My lawyer shielded me as we reached the courthouse doors. "You don't have to say anything," he whispered. "Let the paper speak." Outside, the air was cool, the kind that smells faintly of rain on stone. The sun was setting, painting the courthouse columns orange and gold. A crowd had gathered beyond the steps, curious onlookers, journalists, maybe even people who once believed their lies. The murmurs rippled through them like wind through tall grass. "She got it all back," someone said quietly. "No," I thought, "not all." Because what they took wasn't just money or property. It was years, confidence, belief that family couldn't destroy you. That kind of theft doesn't refund easily. A microphone was shoved in my direction. "Do you have a message for them?" a reporter asked. I stopped. "Yes," I said simply. "Truth doesn't need permission to exist." flashbulbs went off. 100 versions of my face captured mid-breath. I didn't smile. There was nothing to celebrate, just balance restored. Eric walked out behind me, escorted by his lawyer. He caught my eye but didn't speak. His lips parted like he might, then closed again. Regret looked strange on him. Too late. Too thin. Megan followed, her wrists briefly caught in the bailiff's hold as they confirmed her processing terms. The sight should have satisfied me. It didn't. It just felt inevitable. I stepped down the marble stairs slowly, each footfall grounding me further in reality. The folded decree pressed against my palm. I thought about the night they threw me out. How I'd stood on this same kind of step, clutching a bag of receipts, praying for a miracle. Back then, I thought justice was something you waited for. I know better now. It's something you drag into the light yourself. My lawyer caught up. "They'll probably appeal," he said, "but the assets are frozen. You're safe." Safe. The word didn't sound real yet. "Let them appeal," I said. "They can chase the shadow if they want. I have the paper." He smiled faintly. "Then it's done." The wind picked up, rustling the edge of the document as I unfolded it once more. The court seal glinted faintly under the streetlight. It wasn't just legal ink. It was an ending carved into permanence. Around me, the city carried on. Cars moved, people laughed, life continued like nothing monumental had happened. But I knew what this meant. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It was freedom. And freedom, I realized, feels heavier than loss ever did. It's quiet again. Too quiet. The sound of the key turning in the lock felt heavier than I remembered. The door opened into stillness. No laughter, no footsteps, just air and memory. The furniture was gone, the walls bare where pictures once hung. The smell of dust lingered, mixed with faint traces of old perfume that seemed unwilling to leave. I stood there for a moment, unsure if I should step in or let the emptiness breathe without me. The afternoon light slanted through the window, soft and clean. I ran my hand along the edge of the wall, feeling the uneven paint, the texture of years hidden under gloss. Every mark told a story, every scratch from a chair, every nail hole from a frame that once held a lie. My neighbor appeared at the doorway, holding a small pot. "I made soup," she said quietly. "Everyone's been talking about the trial." I smiled faintly. "Let them talk." She placed the pot on the counter. "You did the right thing. People forget how long justice takes, but it always shows up for those who keep records." I nodded. It's strange. I fought for this house, and now that it's mine again, it feels like someone else's. She looked around. "It's yours when you fill it with your own air again." When she left, I walked slowly through each room. The dining table was gone. The couch where they once sat, gone. The cabinet where I'd kept the family albums, empty. Only one photo frame remained on the floor, the glass cracked but the image still clear, a picture from years ago, before betrayal had a name. I picked it up, wiped away a thin film of dust, and set it on the windowsill. The silence pressed close, but not cruelly this time. It was different, more like calm after a storm than loneliness. I realized how much energy I had spent fighting for sound, for validation, for acknowledgement. Now I could finally sit in stillness and not feel erased. At 5 o'clock, I made tea and sat by the window. Across the street, a group of children played, shouting names I didn't recognize. Their laughter floated in, uninvited but welcome. I sipped slowly and let the quiet rhythm of the neighborhood fill the space that used to echo with tension. I spent the next few hours sorting through what was left. Boxes of letters, receipts, bank statements, remnants of years spent proving what should have been obvious. I stacked them neatly, ready for the shredder. Some things didn't need to survive the truth. When evening fell, I went through the folder from court one last time. The judgment seal gleamed faintly under the lamp. It wasn't pride that filled me. It was closure. I traced the embossed edge of the paper and thought about the money that came with it. Half would go to the local shelter. They needed new beds, maybe a water heater. I didn't need that much anymore. Some restarts belonged to others. My phone buzzed, a message from the shelter director. "Your donation cleared, thank you. You just funded 3 families' move-in costs." I stared at the screen for a long second. My chest felt light, like something had unlatched. The house had always been a battlefield, every wall holding echoes of arguments and control. Now, with the furniture gone, there were no hiding places for ghosts, only space, open, honest, unclaimed. I sat in the empty living room, the wooden floor cool under my feet. The chair by the window stood alone, catching the last of the day's light. It wasn't the same kind of home I once imagined, but maybe that was the point. Sometimes peace doesn't come with comfort. It comes with truth. I remembered something Lane said outside the courthouse. People rebuild differently after justice. Some start fresh, others start smaller. Both are victory. He was right. The house was smaller now, but it felt real. Every empty corner carried weight, not absence. Every echo sounded like proof of my own survival. I opened the window slightly. The wind moved through the curtains, brushing against the cracked frame. The faint hum of the streetlights replaced the noise that used to live here. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone to speak, to explain, to return. The silence now belonged to me. Peace has its own noise. "Dear Eric, I forgive you." The words looked strange on paper. My hand hesitated after writing them, the pen trembling slightly against the grain. Forgiveness had been a word I'd avoided for years, too clean for what we lived through. But tonight, at 7, under the same yellow lamp that once lit our family bills and grocery lists, I tried to mean it. The house was quiet again, and the air held that faint trace of dust and old paper. Everything about this moment felt both final and unfinished. I wrote the next line slowly. "Not because you deserve it, but because I do." It wasn't meant to be poetic. It was survival. I had spent too long carrying the weight of what they took: money, peace, dignity, and pretending the verdict was enough. The court gave me the deed back, yes, but it couldn't return the lost years, the silence that settled between siblings, the disbelief from neighbors who chose gossip over truth. Forgiveness, I realized, was the last form of ownership I still had. I looked around the room, the pen resting beside an empty envelope, the drawer where the forged deed had once been hidden. That drawer used to be a battlefield. Now it was just wood, empty and harmless. I reached inside and found the old key still taped to the underside. I had kept it without reason, maybe as proof that some locks could outlive the lies they once guarded. The letter grew in fits and pauses. "You broke more than rules. You broke the part of me that trusted love to protect itself. I used to think people steal for survival, but you stole because control made you feel safe." The words darkened slightly as the ink deepened, like the page wanted to keep a record of the pain before it dried. I wrote about the first check that went missing, the way the stories never added up, the dinners where everyone pretended nothing was wrong. I wrote about the night they laughed in the courtroom hall, whispering that I looked pathetic. And then I wrote about the gavel falling, about how the truth didn't make me happy, only steady. At some point, the anger shifted. It didn't vanish. It just lost its sharpness. "I forgive you," I wrote again. "But that doesn't mean I want you near me." Forgiveness isn't reunion. It's release. The sound of the pen scratching across the page was the only rhythm in the room. I stopped when my hand cramped, flexing my fingers slowly. My reflection in the window looked older, calmer. Not free, exactly, just unbound. I sealed the letter halfway, folding the flap, but not pressing it shut. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. I imagined him reading it, maybe years from now, after pride fades and age turns noise into reflection. I imagined him realizing what he broke wasn't property. It was trust. Then I imagined not sending it. That image felt better. I placed the envelope in the drawer next to the key, the same spot where deceit once lived, now held silence. No more court files, no receipts, no evidence, just a letter I'd never send. Closure didn't need witnesses. It just needed truth acknowledged privately. The house creaked lightly as I closed the drawer, as if listening. Outside, the night had deepened. I could see faint lights from other homes, other lives moving quietly toward sleep, everyone chasing their own kind of peace. I whispered into the stillness, "It's over." It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. Before turning off the lamp, I touched the edge of the envelope one last time. My handwriting looked uneven, but real. Each line was proof that I had survived what was meant to break me. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you hand to the guilty. It's what you return to yourself once they no longer deserve your pain. The lamp clicked off. The air settled. Some truths stay powerful only when unsent. "You were right, Mom." The words came through the phone like a confession. It was almost sunset. The sky outside had turned gold at the edges, soft and fading. I didn't speak. I just listened to the tremor in his voice. Eric sounded smaller than I remembered, like the fight had finally left him. There was a pause, and then he said quietly, "I left her. I'm starting over." I gripped the phone tighter. My hand didn't shake this time. "I see," I said softly. He exhaled, a sound that carried years of pride breaking apart. "You warned me. I thought you were bitter, but you were right." I could hear cars in the background, maybe a street, somewhere far away. The world on his end still moved, unaware that a lifetime's damage was being unpacked in a few short sentences. "I found the letters," he continued. "All those bills you covered, all the things you did to keep us steady. I thought you were trying to control everything. Turns out, you were saving us." The air around me felt heavy, but not cruel. I wanted to tell him it didn't matter anymore, but it did. Every late payment, every signature forged, every cold look at a dinner table, it all led to this moment where he finally understood. Sometimes justice doesn't need an audience. It just needs acknowledgement. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I leaned back in the chair near the window, watching the lights sink below the trees. "That's not my burden to carry anymore," I said. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind that lets truth breathe. He said, "I hope you're okay." "I am," I replied. And for once it was true. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I kept your key. The one you dropped that night. I couldn't throw it away." My throat tightened. "Keep it," I said. "It'll remind you that doors can open again, but not all of them are meant to." He didn't respond right away. I heard the faint sound of wind through the line, a car door closing, and then, "Thank you for everything I didn't deserve." When the call ended, the quiet returned. I set the phone down on the table and reached for the old brass key resting beside it. The same one they had thrown at me months ago when they told me to leave. Its edges were still worn from years of use. Funny how something so small could hold so much history. The voicemail icon blinked once. I pressed play. It was his message, left earlier that afternoon, voice unsteady but clear. "Mom, if you ever listen to this, just know I get it now. You were never trying to win. You were trying to protect. I was too blind to see it." I let it play twice. The sound filled the room, echoing against the walls that had once heard nothing but silence. This was the full circle, the echo of everything I had once prayed he'd say, finally reaching me when I no longer needed it. Outside, the last streak of daylight faded. I looked at the key in my palm, cold metal catching the dim light. It used to symbolize exile. Now it meant closure. Regret had come for him, just as I said it would, but so had growth. And in that, there was peace. I stood, walked to the window, and drew the curtains. The room dimmed, not in sadness, but in rest. Some endings don't require applause, they just need understanding. My reflection in the glass looked calm, older, whole. I whispered into the quiet. Peace is earned, not given. Then I turned the lock, slowly, firmly. I finally locked the door from inside. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story, with respect and gratitude.